Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Abdul Ro Zac, and today I'm going to present about my research on the articles named that an experimental comparison of usage-based and checklist-based reading. And here is the questions proposals. First question is about the research method is used in the article or not. The second question is the papers that research questions. The third one is the kind of research questions are described. And the fourth, what data collection techniques are used. The fifth one, does the paper use hypothesis? And last one is, does the paper discuss traceability? And here we come to the first question, which is an established research method used. So as I saw in the article, is that they use the control experiment as their main research method. The paper present an experiment which compare usage-based and checklist-based reading. The results show that reviewers applying usage-based reading are more efficient and effective in detecting the most critical faults from a user point of view. There are more than the reviewer who using checklist-based reading. So basically, usage-based reading may have the preferable for software organizations that utilize or will start utilizing use case in their software development. And the second question is that, does the paper state research questions? And also I saw in the articles that they put the research question in their description of the usage-based reading. We can see that there are four questions proposed, which is they mark as the RQ1 until RQ4. So the required research question is that the first one is the UBR, means that the usage-based reading more effective than the CBR, means the checklist-based reading, in finding the most critical fault. Second question is that, is the UBR more efficient than the CBR in terms of total number of critical faults found per hour? And third question is about, are different faults detected when using UBR and CBR, which means they compare between these two and they find differences between them. And the last question is about is UBR more effective and efficient than CBR considering the performance of inspection. So in the fourth research question, they compare the UBR and CBR in terms of performance. Okay, and we come to the next question, which is, what kind of research questions are described? Basically, the question obviously describe the classification of the inspection techniques, where they conduct the research in classifying the techniques, and step by step explain the background as well as the properties of each reading techniques, and thus they produce an experimental comparison about these techniques. Besides, they also show the analysis result in order to prove their study and use those analysis material as an evidence to conclude which technique is better than others. The next question is that, what kind of research questions are described? First of all, they describe in the general background of each technique in section 2. In section 3, the background of and the principle of UBR, which is the usage-based reading, are presented. The following section, which is the section 4, the experiment is presented or conducted. Experiment preparation in section 4 experiment planning in season 5, and experiment operation in season 6. And in section 7, the analysis of the experiment result is presented, and in season 8 and 9 the results are discussed and summarized. What data collection technique are used? Actually, they use the performance measurements as their data collection techniques. First of all, the students participating as the reviewer in the study were 23 fourth year students from software engineering, and they are master students with some experience. This means that the students are rather experienced, and to some extent comparable to the fresh software engineering in industry, which means this student has experience is quite equal to the employee. Next, the inspection experiment is based on material developed for verification and validation course in software engineering. The material consists of 4 documents in structured text: 1 requirement document, 1 design document writing in the specification and descripting language, 1 use case document, and 1 checklist. This is like the document prepared for the experimental process conducted. The use case document and the design were used in a previous experiment at the other university, which is the London University. The requirement document and the checklist were developed for this experiment. So as we can see that the requirement document and the checklist document has just like the new version that not developed before. And the next question is that does the paper use hypothesis? The answer is yes. They have the separate section for the hypothesis. They analysis and they have a hypothesis on the aspect of the study. They define the hypothesis in the paper as 3 main types, which are efficiency, effectiveness, and difference, which is the fourth. The general hypothesis of the experiment is that UBR is more efficient and effective in finding faults of most critical fault classes. So they also use the hypothesis keyword, which is H0. F means for the initial hypothesis for effectiveness, efficiency, and we have the HAF means that the hypothesis for effectiveness. The hypothesis for efficiency also, but this is the analysis phase, and the initial for effectiveness, which is the rate here as presented as H0 rate and HA rate, and the H0 fault and HA fault is presented for difference, which is the third type of the hypothesis. The next and last question is that does the paper discuss the threat to validity? The answer is yes. They have the separate section for threat to validity. They consider 4 types of threat, which is the first one is threat to conclusion validity, are considered under control. The only risk in the treatment implementation is that the subject were trained one day and the experiment was conducted in the next day. Hence, they might inform each other about the other techniques, even though they were strictly forbidden to do so. The second threat is that is about the internal validity. The risk of rival between groups is considered the largest one. Then the third threat is that is about the construct validity. This construct validity are not considered very much harmful because the development of the textual requirement document was performed after the development of the use case. Hence, there is a risk that the use case may have affected the requirement document to make it suitable for the use case. Concerning the externality, the use case of student or subject is a threat. So I think that's all for the presentation. Thank you for watching.